So, it's 1517. A German monk named Martin Luther has some notes, 95 of them to be exact. He posts them on a church door in Wittenberg, which was the academic equivalent of putting a strongly worded suggestion in the company Dropbox. He was mostly annoyed about the church selling indulgences, get-out-of-purgatory free cards, to fund a lavish renovation of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It was a theological dispute, a debate between experts, except someone got a hold of his list, took it to the newfangled printing press, and hit send to all. Suddenly, Luther's academic complaints went viral across the Holy Roman Empire. Pope Leo X, a man who famously enjoyed the finer things, was not amused. What started as a request to clarify church doctrine accidentally became the spark for centuries of people finding a brand new, divinely sanctioned reason to kill each other. An impressive, if unintentional, achievement. The common folk of Germany heard Luther's talk of Christian freedom and, quite reasonably, thought it might apply to them. You know, freedom from serfdom, crushing taxes, and lords who treated them like farm equipment. In 1524, they rose up in what's known as the German Peasants' War, presenting their demands in a document called the 12 Articles. Their requests included things like fair rent and the right to fish in the local stream. Radical stuff. Luther, who had been enjoying the support of princes, was horrified. He didn't mean actual freedom. That was crazy talk. He quickly penned a helpful little pamphlet titled "Against the Murderous Thieving Hordes of Peasants," inviting the nobility to smite, slay, and stab them. The princes, who needed no encouragement, slaughtered an estimated 100,000 people. It was a fantastic lesson in how quickly revolutionary ideas get abandoned when the wrong people start getting them. With the peasants firmly back in their place, the German princes realized this whole Reformation thing was a golden opportunity. For centuries, they'd been under the thumb of the Holy Roman Emperor. At this time, a fellow named Charles V, who ruled an empire so large he probably needed a map to find his own bedroom. By converting to Lutheranism, these princes could tell both the Pope and the Emperor to get lost. As a delightful bonus, they could seize all the wealthy Catholic church lands in their territory. For God, of course. They formed a little club called the Schmalkaldic League, which was essentially a military alliance with a religious mission statement. Charles V tried to put a stop to this, leading to the Schmalkaldic War. It was a messy, back-and-forth affair that was less about theology and more about whose army was better funded. This set a wonderful precedent. For the next century, sincerely held religious beliefs would be the best possible cover for a good old-fashioned land and power grab. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, the famously devout and even more famously rich King Philip II of Spain had a problem. His Dutch subjects were getting very into Calvinism, a stricter, less fun version of Protestantism. They also weren't keen on paying Spanish taxes. Philip, ruling from his palace in Spain, decided to handle this with subtlety and grace. By which I mean he sent the Duke of Alba and 10,000 soldiers to set up something called the Council of Troubles. The locals called it the Council of Blood, which is a clue. This kicked off the 80 Years' War. That is not a typo. 80 years. It was a grueling, generation-spanning conflict of sieges, mutinies, and pirates called the Sea Beggars. Spain bankrupted itself multiple times trying to crush the rebellion. The Dutch just refused to lose. It's a masterclass in how to turn a protest into a national identity, provided you're willing to fight about it for longer than the average human lifespan. Not to be outdone, France decided to have its own internal religious meltdown, or, more accurately, 8 of them. The French Wars of Religion were a series of civil wars between Catholics and French Protestants, called Huguenots. The whole mess was overseen by the Queen Mother, Catherine de' Medici, who spent decades trying to keep her deeply unimpressive sons on the throne. Her master plan for peace involved marrying her Catholic daughter to the Protestant leader, Henry of Navarre. The wedding party turned into the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, where thousands of Huguenots were murdered in Paris. So, not a great start to the marriage. This led to the wonderfully confusing War of the Three Henrys. You had King Henry III, the Catholic extremist Henry of Guise, and the Protestant Henry of Navarre. One Henry had the other Henry assassinated. Then a monk assassinated that Henry. This left Henry of Navarre, the Protestant, to become king. He solved the problem by converting to Catholicism, famously declaring Paris is worth a mass. A truly pragmatic end to decades of pious slaughter. By 1618, everyone had had a good 100 years to let these religious disagreements fester. And then came the 30 Years' War, the big one. The continent-spanning sequel that makes the original look like a minor skirmish. It started, as all great catastrophes do, with a ridiculous incident in Prague. Some angry Protestant nobles went to Prague Castle to complain to the Catholic representatives of the Holy Roman Emperor. The discussion did not go well, so the Protestants solved the dispute by throwing the two representatives and their secretary out of a third-story window. This is known elegantly as the Second Defenestration of Prague. Miraculously, the men survived. Legend says they landed in a pile of horse manure, which is just the perfect metaphor for the war that followed. The Bohemian rebels then offered their crown to a German Protestant prince named Frederick V, who became known as the Winter King, because that's about how long his reign lasted before the emperor's forces crushed him. Throwing people out a window had, predictably, failed to solve the underlying political issues. With the Bohemian Revolt smashed, the war could have ended, but other countries saw an opportunity. First, the King of Denmark, Christian IV, decided to invade northern Germany to defend Protestantism. He was promptly and professionally humiliated by the emperor's armies, so that went well. Then came the real superstar, King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden, the Lion of the North. He landed in Germany with a small, highly disciplined army that used new tactics like mobile artillery and volley fire. It was a military revolution. For 2 years, he rampaged across Germany, turning the tide for the Protestant cause and generally looking invincible. He was funded by the French, by the way. We'll get to that. Then, at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, he got lost in the fog, charged the enemy lines, and was killed. A rather anticlimactic end for the Protestant savior. It turns out even brilliant military innovators are not, in fact, bulletproof. After Gustavus Adolphus checked out, the war should have fizzled. But now France decided to get involved directly. Here's the beautiful part. France was a Catholic kingdom. Its government was run by a Catholic cardinal, the shrewd and magnificent Cardinal Richelieu. And for years, he had been secretly funding the Protestant Swedes to fight the Catholic Habsburg Emperor. Now he brought France into the war openly on the Protestant side. Why? Because Richelieu's greatest fear wasn't heresy. It was a strong, unified Germany on his border. He operated on a principle he called raison d'etat, reason of state. This is a fancy French way of saying, my country's interests are more important than God's. So now you had Catholic France and Protestant Sweden fighting the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor and Catholic Spain. any pretense that this was about faith was gone. It was just a brutal, cynical, continent-wide gang war for territory and influence, fought mostly by mercenaries who devastated the German countryside. By the 1640s, everyone was exhausted. The war had raged for 30 years, and no one was really winning. The German lands, where most of the fighting took place, were an apocalyptic wasteland. Some states of the Holy Roman Empire lost over half their population to war, famine, and plague. 8 million people might be a conservative estimate. Entire generations knew nothing but conflict. Finally, the belligerents dragged themselves to the negotiating table in Westphalia. After years of bickering, they signed the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. And what was the grand revolutionary conclusion they reached after 30 years of unimaginable slaughter? A principle called cuius regio, eius religio was affirmed, meaning whose realm, his religion. The ruler of a state could determine its official faith. This was, more or less, the situation they had before the war started. They had simply burned Germany to the ground to write it down on a fancier piece of paper. The 30 Years' War was so traumatic that it effectively vaccinated Europe against large-scale religious wars. They didn't stop fighting, of course. Humans are great at finding reasons to fight, but they started being a little more honest about it. They fought over trade, colonies, and who got to sit on which throne. The Peace of Westphalia accidentally created the modern system of sovereign states. The idea that a country is its own boss within its borders, and that other countries shouldn't interfere with its internal affairs, like, say, its choice of religion. It was the end of the beautiful dream of a unified Christian Europe and the beginning of the messy reality of international politics. So, in the end, the wars of religion achieved something profound. They didn't prove which version of Christianity was right. They just proved that trying to settle the question with armies is a catastrophically, monumentally, and predictably stupid idea. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!